when companies are able to structure any sort of change initiative across these 5 steps, they're covering 90% of the possible errors and mistakes. When I hear someone describing themselves as experts, I'm always a little skeptical.
And the first time I met you, you were so approachable and come into my world, and I want to understand your needs. And I think that's where your USP is, going into any company and really understanding.
I think that what makes me and my team really motivated about what we do is to, wow, nobody ever asked me that question.
Today we spoke to Fabrizio Ulivi, managing partner of SBA, focused on people strategy, change management, organizational effectiveness, and leadership development. In this episode, we talked about how there are no quick solutions, although he offers some quick solutions, common problems for companies and how to overcome them, and being an entrepreneur by coincidence. Here's our conversation with Fabrizio.
Welcome to the Panda Profits podcast. Today we have the honor of having Fabrizio on board with us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Could you just start off, introduce the people, who are you, how did you end up here, what's your story and where are you now?
Sure. I'm Fabrizio Ulivi. I am a managing partner right now of my business called SBA, Shibisat Associates. I'm a people strategy consultant. So what I do is that I help businesses align their business goals and strategies with everything concerning their organization, their sustainable growth, and their people. And I got here by coincidence. I'm an entrepreneur by coincidence. I was an employee in this company when, unfortunately, after a few years of working very closely with its founder, the founder passed away. Shibisa passed away very suddenly. And so at that point, I was faced with a decision to make. So either go and look for another job or try and preserve the legacy of a person that came to China in 1982. And for 40 years I've been doing that job. Being, partially the sentimental Italian I am, I didn't want her legacy to disappear all of a sudden. And so at that time I was the only full-fledged consultant in the business. And I presented the family, who owned the business at that time, with the option of, let's see what happens. Let me try and bring the existing contracts to their natural conclusion. If in the meantime the pipeline continues, then let's talk about the transfer of ownership. And I gave it my best try. And it went fairly well. Actually, it went way better than I expected. And so at the end of that trial period, I called back another employee of the company that at that time was on personal leave for personal reasons. And I told him, hey dude, I need help. I can't do this by myself, so how about you come back? And he did, and he became a business partner. He's currently my business partner. Yeah. And it was a blessing because we were both trained by the same expert for many years. So we shared similar philosophies and approaches and methodologies. While I'm more on the consulting side, he's definitely more on the analysis side. He's an amazing analyst. And so our skill sets are very complementary. And so it was that we became partners in this business. 2019 was a great ramp up. And then COVID happened. And it was an experience. But we're still here, so we managed to push through.
One question that I was just, because we were talking here before we started filming about the word experts, right? Because you said, I don't want people to call me an expert. I don't think I'm ever an expert. But then whenever I hear you talk now about people you actually admire, you like to label them as experts.
Fair. Good point. Good point. Let me clarify for the audience first, and then I'll build on it. So, as I was saying before we started recording, I don't like the concept of considering oneself an expert. And mostly, out of caution for myself, right? Because I have this fear that the moment I believe I'm an expert in something, I'll stop looking, I'll stop learning, and I don't want that to happen. So that's why when I hear someone describing themselves as experts, I'm always a little skeptical, because my immediate reaction is, does that mean that you are not looking out for new things anymore? Like you're an expert on these and so that's it? Which, to be fair, most of the time is not true.
Yeah.
But then I do recognize that there are experts around me, and those are the people I learn from. So in the case of the founder of my company, I'm certainly defining her as an expert because of the sheer expertise she could draw from, and the ability that she used to have of maintaining incredible flexibility while drawing from experience. That to me is an expert. Is someone who achieved mastery in a certain domain to the extent that they can switch and pivot and find alternatives from the top of their heads. And that's what she used to do. And that's what I'm striving for. I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Really sorry to hear about the founder as well. But what a legacy, right? And set you up. I think that's really interesting. Do you think there's some roots there, Italians and family legacy and all this? Does it instill some sort of business acumen when doing business here in China?
Wow, nobody ever asked me that question. I don't think so. Like in my case, I do not come from an entrepreneurial family. Like my father is a vet, so in a sense he is an independent professional, but in a field that in Italy is fairly steady. It's not as challenging as other entrepreneurial endeavors. My mother used to be a nurse, and now she's a psychologist, but I do not come from a strong entrepreneurial family background. And therefore I never thought of myself as a potential entrepreneur. I was perfectly content being an employee of someone else. That's why I define myself as an entrepreneur by coincidence. On the other hand, and going back to the figure of the founder, I think that was my like the universe brought me in a place that I would have not find myself into otherwise. In the sense that she set me and my current business partner up for success. And I only realized that when the tragedy happened. And so we needed to figure out a way to work it out. And that's where I realized how much of an expert she actually was, how much of a leader and a mentor she actually was. Because after 6 years working with her, she set me up to even be able to consider taking over her business. And I give her all the credit for that. If I didn't have the chance to find someone like her, I would probably not have been in the position to just say, okay, let me try. So,
I mean, it's an impressive journey. I feel like we need to find a word for people who became an entrepreneur by chance, right?
By chance, yes.
Because there are some people you think, like when you talk to them, they're like, no, I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur from the time I was walking, and then I started my first business when I was 8 selling apples to my parents or whatever. And then you have the people like, no, I never planned on it. It just happened. And then I took the chance and I jumped on it. And I think that's, it becomes two different kind of journeys.
Was there an element of not letting her down and wanting to build on the legacy?
Major element. So I think that what made me decide to give it a try was, yes, definitely one element of I don't want to let her down. Like if I just walked away, I could probably find another job. There's plenty of consultancies out there, and I have enough experience and credibility due to having worked with her that I can leverage on to find another job. But then on the other hand, yes, I would not have been happy with myself if I didn't at least try and save and preserve her legacy. Like 40 years of incredibly hard work. I could not allow myself to do that. So that's the sentimental part of me that really kicked in. On the other hand, I also felt like I owed it to her, because when she hired me, I knew nothing of our business, of our field. I was a complete newbie. I came from a sort of a recruitment background with incredibly limited understanding of the human resources field. And I applied to this job opening as a project manager. I spent a few nights on Google trying to figure out what organizational development actually meant. And at the first interview, she looked at me She was a chain smoker, so she was well into her 12th cigarette. And she was like, Fabrizio, okay, you can stop pretending. I know you know nothing, but I'll teach you. And she did. And oh gosh, she did. And she not only gave me a job, she found me a passion. So I felt so much in love with what she was teaching me that then when the time came, it was yes, didn't want to let her down, but also I couldn't think of myself doing this other than the way she taught me to. And that's probably why I decided to try and embark on this entrepreneurial journey. I wanted to continue what I was doing with her.
So your niche is actually people. And the first time I met you, you were so approachable. And come into my world, and I want to understand your needs. And I think that's where your USP is, going into any company and really understanding. You start from the people first. And you look at, which is quite interesting, you explained to me before, you don't just go straight for the boss. You're looking into every aspect of the company, even down to the bottom of the hierarchy. So can you dig a little bit more into that?
Absolutely. Yes. The thing is that it's true. Like, I like to think of myself as an approachable person. But on the other hand, I think that what makes me and my team really motivated about what we do is we want to figure it out. Like, if you have a problem, and if your problem is big enough to reach out to someone outside your organization, like us, and most of the time, you don't know me or my team, or someone has told you, oh, you should talk with Fabrizio. Okay, cool. But then if you go as far as to actually approach someone else, asking for help, then it's worth the effort of truly figuring it out. It would be very easy for us to just, like, okay, we've got our model. Oh, you have a problem with attrition rates? People are leaving your company? No problem. We'll do our assessment, but we already know what we're going to do. It would be easy, and it's a random percentage, but I reckon 60-70% of the time, it would probably solve the issue, at least partially, or at least for the short term. Look at salaries, But then the problem I always try to solve is, are we actually solving the problem? Are we actually looking at the people so that the problem is not solved now, it's solved for the long run? That's why any sort of thing we do is a change management initiative. It doesn't matter if we're working on, defining position profiles in the organization, or figuring out what the organizational chart should look like, or workflow and processes. It does not matter until we make sure that we are asking everybody in the organization. Of course, we can't always ask everybody in the organization. We are a small company, we can't interview 1,000 people, but we can make sure that at least we are approaching it in a way that engages people in the solution. So that's, to answer your question, what is the USP, is that we truly care. We care about people, and we care about finding a solution that is truly yours. There's no point in us telling you, that automotive company did that, you can do the same. Because it's not true. Most of the time, it doesn't really apply. What I want to make sure of is, am I developing and deploying or suggesting a solution that is truly catered to what you are doing? And going back full circle to my self intro, it's like, if you have business goals, we start from there. And that's very top down, right? Top of the organization has set strategic goals. They can be sales goals or growth goals or whatever they are. That's cool. They inform a lot of what needs to be done. But then we also like to take a bottom-up approach, right? So that we verify what the top has decided. Because to be quite frank, the top of any organization, doesn't matter if it's 5 people company or 5,000 people company, the leaders in the organization have a specific role, which is to look at the horizon, right? And see what is going to happen, the trends, the strategy, set the tone, set the vision, the mission, how we do things here, all the usual suspects. But then it's the people on the ground that truly know what's happening on the ground. And so if you do not match these two things, well, I mean, the solution you're coming up with is very likely to be short-winded.
So I mean, could you summarize it up like this? What you're looking for when you're trying to do something is you're looking for the root of the problem, not just fixing the problem.
Yes.
Like, why does this problem occur in the first place? Viewing sort of, if you take the doctor's approach, the problem is just a symptom, but I need to find out why I get it.
Exactly. And we use even same language. We call it diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. Like, very often, the type of requests we receive is like, we need communication skills training because our managers cannot communicate. Fair. I mean, it's painfully often. But the thing is that, okay, cool, but that's a symptom.
Yeah.
Why are they not communicating effectively? What is there that is a barrier to effective communications? And so let us talk with your people. Let us understand what the root cause is. More often than not, the problem is not your managers. It's not that they are not communicating effectively. It's that they don't know what to communicate. This is a very typical situation, especially in slightly larger organizations. Middle management is squeezed between the strategic vision and the operational challenges. And they are squeezed in between, having to translate strategy to people on the ground and report back the issues of people on the ground to the strategy makers. And so they're squeezed in between. But if you don't give them a way to translate the strategy, then of course the symptom is that they're not communicating it well. So how do you ensure that you solve the issue is where we actually hit with a solution. A communication skills training very rarely helps. It's always it's bottom line. We need to look at the top line of the problem.
Is the common problem you find it comes from the top and trickles down? Is that the most common, or are you finding that it's a series of different issues?
It's a series of different issues.
Okay.
It really depends. It's very situational. Problems are all over. They're not necessarily top down. It's easy to blame the leaders when an organization is not working because they're visible, because they are there to take responsibility, and therefore it's easy to blame them. But the reality is that very often there are organizational dynamics or company cultures that are just not set up to move them forward. Providing upward feedback in an organization can be incredibly challenging. So that is often an issue. So it's not about the leaders, it's about the flow of information from the bottom to the top. I recently was talking with this client of mine who decided to change a software tool for the supply chain management. Major change, because it impacted the entire organization across the world. Now, why did they have to do that? It was very simple, because the service provider was going to transform into something that they could not use anymore for compliance reasons, so they had to change software. Easy and very little to do about it. We have to change it, and we have to change it quickly. But that's where they made the fundamental mistake. What they did was they sent out an email to everybody, like, hey everyone, we're going to change software, and within the next 3 weeks, this is the training schedule. Look for your name and attend the training. Now, application of the new tool, application rates were very low. A lot of people just kept on using Excel. Because they had been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
It worked just fine. They didn't see why now, and everything is just fine. And everything I have to do, most of the people's feedback was, well, the only thing I have had to do on this regard for the past years was fill out the Excel sheet, upload it, and I'm done. Now you're asking me to go on to this browser-based thing and do an online training for hours, and I don't need that. I'm perfectly fine with what I've been using so far. There was a mismatch in communications. So they actually had to delay the rollout of the software because they realized that nobody was actually going to use it. Major waste of money, major waste of resources. It actually had a severe impact on their organizational performance, on their business performance because of this. And everything could have been preempted by just engaging with people before communicating the decision, letting people know. Like there is this beautiful framework that I like to always refer to, which is the ADKAR model for change. So change happens at individual level, and it's predicated on 5 subsequent steps: awareness for the need for change, desire for the change, knowledge on how to change, ability to implement the change, and then reinforcement to keep the change going and to make the change stick. This is at individual level, but when companies are able to structure any sort of change initiative across these 5 steps, they're covering 90% of the possible errors and mistakes.
So a simple solution, do you think, could have been feedback with the staff first? So saying, look, we're thinking about this software, what do you guys think? And was that an initial suggestion, or was
that
it...
would have been the second step. The first step would have been to tell them, hey guys, we have no choice. We have to change it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like the CEO or the COO woke up yesterday and decided to change software for the sake of changing. We have to change it, and so we want to do it earlier rather than later. So let's talk about how do we want to implement this change. Let's co-create a solution. So that's what we ended up doing. That's what I ended up recommending to this person. I was like, roll it back. Talk with your people. Explain the why so that you create awareness and create desire by engaging them. This is just an example that comes to my mind, but...
I mean, I think it's from personal experience, one issue that comes up sort of as an entrepreneur, especially when you have offices all over, is that you have had this idea for a change. So I've kind of gone through this process to a certain degree when I make the decision, okay, we have to do change. And then in my own kind of naive way, I forget that a lot of the people who are going to be part of this change haven't. So then I will just jump into it assuming that, yeah, of course, they're going to be bored. Like, I've been thinking about this a lot. Why wouldn't you be there? But they haven't gone through that process that I've been doing, where I've done, research, I fought back and forth, I had debates, I talked to people, all of this, they miss that. They just come in on the point where I say, the decision is made, I'm assuming you're just going to skip this entire process and follow me now. And
exactly. And you make a fantastic point, because I've been talking about somewhat larger organizations, but this applies also to entrepreneurs, even more so. I do a bit of advisory with startups and small enterprises, founder-led enterprises and so on. And the problem is that we're human beings and perception is reality. If I spend sleepless nights finding a solution, by the time I make up my mind, I'm done. I'm telling you what is going to happen. Yeah. And I mean, any startupper knows the drill. Like startuppers and founders and entrepreneurs, we spend so much time thinking about how to solve any specific issue or how to get to the next step. Yeah. And then by the time we figure it out, or think we figured it out, it's done. Yeah. It's done. But is it done for everybody else in the team? Not really. So this concept applies to larger organizations, but also the smallest possible organizations. A 2-people company has the exact same dynamic. If one of the 2 people has been banging their head against the problem and found a solution, they will be inclined to present the solution rather than taking the other person on board. Yeah. Even a 2-people company has this. And so at that point, the question is, will they stick with it? Or will they be able to figure out alternatives in the future when new problems come up? So have you empowered your people to be part of the creation process so that they not only understand how to do it, but they also understand why are we doing this, right? I mean, Simon Sinek's start with why is golden in that regard. It's like the ability of communicating why not only why a decision was made, but why are we making a decision is fundamental. Yeah, that's literally what it all revolves around.
Empowering people, that's a key phrase. And a big issue I've got with the companies that I deal with here in China is getting answers to questions. So asking the staff, if you got a question or you don't understand something, let us know. And there's a reluctance to sometimes give that answer. So how do you deal with that specific issue? Because it is an issue a lot of companies asked me to ask you today. Really, because I'm really good with my staff now. My staff, if they got a question, try and find the solution first. If you really can't find it, come to me. How do you get around that, and what's your solution to that specific problem, which is very common with many companies?
Very common, and the solution truly is create a company culture that allows people to speak up. Like it may sound very fluffy in a sense, but reality is that if you're throwing out an idea and asking people, okay, let me know what you think, it's not just a China issue. You bump into this problem almost anywhere. Of course, there are different degrees. Like if you throw this in a bunch of Italian people, there will be a lot of hand waving and people screaming and yelling. But will they give you a solution? Probably no. You will just meet resistance, right? So and you end up at the same exact spot. Like resistance to a change is just as bad as no feedback to change. Neither of those two populations will actually get on board. So what do? You create systems and processes to make it so. Like I'm working right now on a project where Asia Pacific headquarters is faced with a similar situation. They rolled out a major change initiative articulated over 4 different company values. Very well done. Initiative was spot on. They did focus groups. They did all the things that I would normally recommend. Yet they got in touch with me. And what the client told me was like, Fabrizio, we did everything by the book. We did everything we could possibly imagine was necessary, but now we're stuck in China. How so? What's happening right now is that everybody else in Asia Pacific is on board. They're showing the changed behaviors of this organization transformation thing, which revolves around collaboration and speaking up and solving problems together. But we hear nothing coming from China. So immediate reaction is, okay, China being very reactive, everybody else being very proactive, the usual suspects that you were talking about. But then how do we go about it is let's take one step back to take 2 steps forward. Let's engage with the China team to let them tell you in a safe environment. The problem with this specific case, in my opinion at least, is that by the time the China team was involved, by the time all teams were involved, the decision was already made, and therefore the message was, this is going to happen, now you contribute on how to make it happen, which is not bad. Don't get me wrong, it was a pretty good start. But the thing is that if you go live immediately in places that are particularly conflict avoidant or focused on harmony, or very hierarchical, if you go live immediately, then there's no space for second thoughts. Like, oh my God, now it's happening. And so there's like people freeze, like as simple as that. So what we're doing now is, okay, things are rolling, so we are live, but we can still create pockets of safe space for adjustments. Mind you, that requires leadership, sponsorship, and buy-in, because that's what I have suggested to this specific organization. It's like, okay, are you prepared to review what you already rolled out? Because now what I'm suggesting is, let's create breaks for the China team to contribute with the help of an external, impartial consultant. If you're willing to backtrack on some aspects of the initiative you rolled out, then we're doing it. If you're not willing to budge, then don't waste your money on me. There's no point. You'll be wasting your money, and your people will be more disengaged. So if you're not willing to change your own initiative, then just roll with it and see who stays.
Yeah, because I guess if they take you in and they're not really willing to do any change, it might even make the situation worse.
It backfires.
Yeah, because then, at least if I was sitting there, like, okay, now I'm going to talk to you, here's my feedback, and then that's nothing, I will definitely hold that grudge.
Absolutely.
A little bit like, why I gave feedback, like why is nothing?
This is a realization I got to over a few years, because I've been in that situation, and I made a promise to never do that again. Like going in as the external consultant and rolling out an initiative. There was this specific case of a competency mapping process. They wanted to review the competency framework of the entire organization. So competencies and behaviors. To do that, we rolled out interviews, assessments, and we touched different areas of the organization. And then we produced a new competency framework. Mind you, we spent hours and hours and hours of time talking with people, going like, okay, so describe me your normal day at work, who are you dependent from and with, and blah, blah, blah. So by doing that, you build expectations. We created the competency framework, then we provided to the client with a plan to roll it out, but then they decided, okay, no, actually we're not proceeding. That was a disservice to our client, right? And to the people in the organization. So we promised that we promised ourselves that unless we have the certainty that once the initiative is rolling out, it keeps rolling out, we don't do it. So actually, that's something that helps me a lot in the creating relationships with my clients. They know that if I don't think it's useful, I won't do it. I don't care if I don't get paid. I just say no.
Your job basically then when you're doing your diagnosis is to partly, does what we're doing, does that bring value to the client in a positive way? And the second part, what we have to do, is that viable for the client? Because it doesn't matter if you start this and you can't finish it, the value won't be there. Even if you finish it 90%, unless you're finishing it up, you won't get the results. So you need to make sure that then they're able to go all the way through with it.
Spot on. Actually, can you come with me to my next client meeting? Because you can explain that better than I.
Yeah, sure. I'm like, hey, so I am just explaining what he wants to talk about.
I want to play the devil's advocate because I don't entirely agree with Simon. I think there's an element of you could go in with best intentions and the boss could be, yeah, we want to go for this, and then you can do your best, and then at the end said, actually, we're not going to go for this.
Well, in that case, the only thing, it's
does happen.
It happens. It has happened to me
that doesn't mean
multiple
necessarily
times.
Failure. It could be personality.
That's true. No, of course. There's an element of the unknown and people changing their minds. I mean, to put it very simply. But in those cases, the very least I feel I can do is to accept it, and describe the consequences. So at least we can minimize, because it's perfectly fine. I mean, and things change, especially for large scale interventions, such as many that we work on. Things change in the meantime. Like we initiate a restructuring process, and then the market shifts again. Strategic goals change. It's not even a personality thing. Like we live in a world where you don't know what's happening tomorrow. So let alone if you're doing a project that lasts 6 months. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball to look into tomorrow, let alone in 6 months from now. It happens. But then at that point is contingencies. Is like, okay, things change. How can we minimize the negative impact? How can we minimize the waste? And how can we communicate to your people so that they don't feel let down or they don't feel like they wasted their time? I have also another relatively recent case due to COVID and the impact it had on businesses. There was this medium-sized company, headquartered in Europe, manufacturing. They had to shut down in China. They just could not bear the China operations any longer. So they made the decision in headquarters. But they did something also interesting, because resources were allocated in China. Investments were made into China. A plant was operating in China. So just shutting it down and selling it out, I mean, it was the only option. But then what did they do? They actually managed, and it's a brilliant case, the local general manager, the local the head of operations actually came up with an idea. It's like, hey, I know another company that could buy half of these operations, and the other half I'll take charge of it. I'll get the investments for it. And so what they ended up doing was that yes, they let go of their operations. They let go of the risk and the costs, but they ended up with a local partner who could keep producing what they needed. So, and they're still in a business relationship. So this is another example. There's always a solution that someone can come up with that is better than yours. That's what I believe in, at least.
Yeah. How do you show ROI when you go into a company and say, look, I implemented this change and it clearly, a few months or a year later, resulted in this?
ROI is a tricky beast in the people business, because it's not always easy to track with the traditional tracking system. Like it's not always a financial ROI. So when it comes to sales, then obviously ROI is very obvious. Marketing, there's some ways to calculate ROI. In our field, ROI is a little bit more specific, or at least that's how I like to measure it. Current state and future state. So if you approach me with this issue, or if we can agree that the issue is this, then now we have a baseline. And the ROI, we can measure it very easily. If your problem is that you have a 20% attrition rates and we agree that the problem is due to these root causes, then the ROI will be measurable. And that's, again, going back full circle. Why root causes? Because if I just stick with the symptom, there's no way I can track any sort of ROI. So ROI, the way I like to measure it is getting an agreement for the baseline, and then the ROI is pretty obvious. Like if your attrition rates, just sticking to the example, attrition rates 20% reduced to 10%, if I kept track of what I've done, then I'm normally able to tell you, hey, this is due to the fact that we did this, and that, and these are the connections. But then if I stuck with your communication skills training, your attrition rates will still be 20%, if not more, and there's nothing I can track.
One thing that I notice a lot, especially people are coming from like Europe or US, who have a very good mastery of English, whenever they come over to China, it is very easy that without even noticing it, you get such a language advantage that in sales and business, you kill the deal. Because you don't pick up on the fact that you are dominating towards the other side due to your language skills, and then communication fails down. Is that something you have observed as well?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, of course, if we're all speaking English and there is first language speaker, second language, third language speakers at the table, of course the first language speaker gets a head start on normally dominating the conversation, fluency, ability to segue from one topic to the other, you name it. Yes. But honestly, I think the language plays a relatively minor role in this type of dynamics. I think it's more about intercultural awareness and the ability to realize things that go far beyond language. And it goes both ways, right? I mean, I am a Chinese speaker. I oftentimes find myself into meetings that switch to Chinese, and all of a sudden I'm not as smart as I felt like as I was speaking English, right? I see people picking up way faster than me. I need to focus much more. I cannot take notes anymore because I need to focus on what is being said. But then again, I think it's more about awareness, and not just intercultural awareness. So, of course, all the usual aspects of hierarchical positions and power dynamics and so on, but even personality. It's emotional intelligence. It's the ability to understand who is sitting at the table, and are you actually taking away bandwidth to everybody else around the table? Are you missing the opportunity to let others contribute? And that's a skill set that nobody teaches you. Like, you can only develop it yourself. And nobody's going to tell you, oh, you need to be more self-aware. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to figure it out. You need to be prepared, especially if you work in a global business scenario. You need to develop that ability to understand who are you talking with. Right? And maybe that's what Daniel was saying, that I come across as approachable, is that I realize how important it is to me to be understood. But then the next step is, okay, if I want to be understood, I need to understand others. And that's one way to come across as very approachable, I guess.
And you smile a lot as well, so I want to
Oh, well, yeah, that's because I'm
It helps.
smiling. Right?
being silly also.
Yeah.
But yes, the thing is, language plays a role, but there's much more. Much more than it boils down to leadership. Leadership skills, leadership behaviors. So on one hand, there is the ability of allowing others, like giving others the opportunity to use some of that bandwidth. So, in a sense, restrain, like exercise restraint on ourselves, allowing others to have enough time to process. Because very often, and I see this a lot with, first language English speakers coming into China, it's difficult to realize, especially if you do not live here, that for Chinese people, English is a second language. Just as it is for Italians. Need time to listen, translate into my mother tongue, and then feed it back. Even just that action takes time. As fast in processing as we can be, we need time. That realization already goes a long way. On the other hand, is also the ability to do exactly what you described. I heard you, I'm not sure I understood entirely. So the ability to tell you, hey, hold your horses. This is what I heard. Was this correct? And if not, can you clarify? Like, this is the most difficult coaching skill ever, or leadership skill ever. The ability to say, can you clarify that? And we can use, summarizing, paraphrasing, and I do trainings on this for senior executives exactly on this topic. It's like, when someone tells you something, it's up to you as a leader to be able to understand if they got it or if you got it. So let me understand, if you don't mind, can I use my time to ask you to clarify this for me? By doing that, I'm giving you the opportunity to also reflect on what you just said, because nobody's perfect. So maybe you want to rephrase, maybe you want to actually change the point a little bit. And then I get time and the opportunity to clarify. It takes two to tango. Like this thing where we do cross-cultural training and now off you go into the world and now you know everything about China. I find it very silly because yes, culture, and books and handbooks and doing business with China handbooks are very cool stuff. But we need to develop skills to deal with people. At the end of the day, if you're dealing with people, you need to learn how to. That's it.
We all need that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
You never get to a point where you feel like you're even close to mastering it.
Yeah.
It's just feel like, I got slightly better, but it's still like...
You see? Nobody can be an expert on people.
Well,
I'm really conscious now. I'm speaking English, and in your head you're thinking, hold on a minute, Italian, then I'm going to translate back into English. That's what I'm doing. But
I'm picking up English and then Swedish, Norwegian, and mixing it all.
Yeah. Simon, key takeaways.
One thing is we need to have you on again, because God, I have a lot of questions that I want to dig in deeper. But I think one of the sort of key things that I really got from this is communication skills seems to be such an important aspect in anything you do. If you want to take away anything, getting to a point where you're able to clearly communicate both what needs to be done, but then also having the listening skills. So not just only outbound communication, but also inbound communication. So you're able to pick up and engage with the people. So you're creating a two-way engagement so that people feel like they're part of the process that you're trying to change, not just the subject of the process. That, I think, was a big part in creating buy-ins. And then I also liked one thing you said really early on was that middle managers are like the people who are translating strategy to action. I think that is an absolutely great way of describing it.
Yeah, and absolutely. Communication is always two ways, and middle management is the hardest job that anybody can ever take on.
Is there any way to just skip up to upper management?
And there's no quick solution. I would say that's one big thing that a lot of companies and people, they want a quick, what's the magic formula? And it does take time, right? Whether you're selling your product or changing a part of your business and looking at how you're interacting with your employees, it's a process, and it will take time.
If you want to do it properly, yes. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is always a quick fix. In my field, cost cutting, fire people. That's a quick fix. But then the effects in the long run are you prepared to the unintended effects of quick fixes? That's one of the questions I always ask myself too. It's like, there are unintended consequences to any action, and the ability to anticipate them allows for proper planning, and especially when it comes to people and organizational decision making. There are quick fixes, but there are consequences. If you're ready to take the consequences that even quick fixes can do. But if you're not ready, then you should reconsider.
Where can people get in touch with you?
Well, most Italian restaurants and bars across town.
Just randomly go to an Italian restaurant.
Yes, I also stand out because I shine. Like so.
Very handsome though.
Yeah, you identify me very quickly. No, I'm just kidding. LinkedIn is probably the place to get in touch with me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I find it an amazing platform. I mean, globally. And so probably LinkedIn would be the place. Look for my name if need be. And also via my company website, although who uses websites anymore these days? But it's peoplestrategy-partners.com in case anybody wants to go and take a look at what we actually do.
Thank you so much. Grazie. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. It's really nice.
Subscribe, like, comment, and we'll see you next time, guys.